All right, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us here at Disciples Counseling and Coaching in partnership, of course, with Disciples in Recovery here on a Monday. Praise the Lord. All right, if you are joining us live, of course, feel free to join us here within the Zoom platform, and you could access the Zoom link via Disciples Counseling and Coaching Facebook under events. And look to Disciples Counseling and Coaching Facebook as well for trainings, workshops, and a few seminars as well on the calendar. Today is Sacred Design, Beauty as External Regulation. And if you have any questions, comments, insights, or would just like to have some dialogue regarding this specific topic, feel free to reach out to us. All right, our purpose this afternoon, this module is intended for facilitators, right, to use environmental design as co-regulation rather than demanding immediate emotional processing. Leadership movement, leadership movement, sound, color, and spatial structure. So participants' nervous systems settle before a conversation begins. So this is very intentional environmental design that will walk out 5 specific areas for support. Our claim this afternoon: in Torah, holiness is spatial as well as ethical. And the Mishkan, organized proximity, rhythm, and visual symbolism so the community could approach God without overwhelm. Trauma-informed facilitation mirrors this pattern, right? That beauty becomes an external nervous system that upholds people until internal stability returns. All right, our core principle today, simple. The room regulates before the leader speaks, right? And how many times, right, do we enter a space and does it incite calm or excitement or, and typically it's intentional, right? So we want to be intentional about who we support and how we support them with the physical environment. Sounds fair, right? All right, we have a few biblical formation anchors. The first is from Exodus 25 through 27, specific to the tabernacle or Mishkan. The Mishkan's design guides movement and attention. Secondly, Numbers 2, specific to ordered encampment that reduces chaos and anxiety. And we could just say, any type of emotional response, behavioral as well. Number 3, 1 Corinthians 14:33 and 40, God of peace, right? Order sustains communal safety. And our learning objectives today, again, this is specified for facilitators, right? So we're talking about group leaders, ministry leaders, teachers, if you're in behavioral mental health, etc. If you're a parent, right? So just about anybody who fits this kind of criteria. So welcome, and again, feel free to comment, on this video, and follow us on Facebook, Disciples Counseling and Coaching via Facebook. Enough promos. So number one, design spaces that reduce hypervigilance. And so we could be intentional about that. Secondly, to use visual and sensory cues, right? And we always use these, but maybe they need kind of reinforcement or realignment or just a change. Number three, to introduce structure before dialogue, right? And of course, we're mostly talking about those in person. Virtual, there are some challenges, but these are more um, predicated on the physical environment and not a virtual environment. Number four, maintain dignity without forcing disclosure. And so we'll walk out a few exercises that are practical to designing a space of beauty as external regulation. Yes, welcome. All right. Number one, sacred entry path, regulated movement. And so, just as this sounds, right, the purpose here is to create a space, right, that slows the response, the nervous system, through intentional transition into a given space. So we could have multiple transitions, right? And here is one example. And of course, feel free to personalize these. Of course, send us some messages about how your approach would differ. And these are, again, examples that we'll present today. So here's the setup: is to create a simple pathway into the building, into the room, um, and accent pieces, right? Tables, perhaps, throw blankets, banners, candles. We call this ambiance as well, right? If there are specific um, artifacts that you want to be part of this design as well. Lighting always matters, right? If it's a place to activate a certain response, then the lighting should be accordingly, right? For myself personally, I'm just all about calm and bringing things down, maybe to a level 2 out of 10. So, so typically soft light, neutral color contrast, not too many bold choices for me personally. Some organic, right, elements as well, depending on the ambiance that you're setting here in the entryway. And again, these are specific to transitions, right? So to put this into practice, these are examples, of course. Number one, right, invite participants to walk in quietly, and you may have someone receive, right, if you're in counseling or a therapist or so on, right? Secondly, ask them to notice a visual detail, right, without speaking. And this could be very intentional. We're not trying to trick anyone here, right? So you might say, "Hey, take notice. I want you to take notice of the painting on the wall for 20 seconds." And be intentional as well about the physiological response, right? Take a slow breath before sitting. Right? It could be a breathing exercise as well. And here's the trauma insight, right? Predictable movements mirror the Mishkan, the progression, right, from the outer court to the inner space. And it helps the body shift from a place of alertness to orientation. All right, number two. I don't know if I have favorites, but color anchoring and visual co-regulation. So here's where we get to be creative with a different aesthetic, right? The purpose here is to use color as a stabilizing signal rather than simply with our verbal communication or even specific emotional language, right? Again, we're talking about setting tones here with the visual aesthetic. And so what we're doing here really prevents emotional escalation, right? Because the nervous system reacts more strongly to perceived intent than to the behavior itself. The setup here is to choose 2 to 3 consistent colors. So, for example, white for clarity, blue for calm, gold for identity. And some of these we want to take in some cultural, right, influences as well. So know the people that we serve, right? Place either, palettes, colored cards, fabrics, where everyone can see them as well. Right? These could be like literal visuals, posters, quotations as well that follow a specific color scheme. So first, we would invite participants to intentionally rest their eyes on one color for 20 seconds, right? And it's sometimes, of course, difficult to just be still in that moment with the participant. And you may, of course, practice this right yourself as well. And no sharing is required. Just simply observe the moment. And here's the Torah connection. The Mishkan used repeated color schemes, right, to create familiarity. So repetition, right, in this sense, really reduces nervous system unpredictability, right? And dependent on, if participants or we may be talking about family, right, as well. So these could be daily occurrences, coming home, coming to the office, coming to a ministry space, whether that's, biweekly or daily or just weekly. Um, and so the nervous system is going to respond to the predictability of and even anticipate those colors, right? Especially if we're talking about soft tones as well. The trauma insight here is a visual one, right? Visual rhythm and intentionality and focus to help regulate attention and not really coercing any type of vulnerable response or elicit any specific response. All right, we just want to take a couple minutes here. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free. If you're here within the Zoom platform, I know some of us are on lunch break and are at work and things of that nature, and that's fine. But you could use the chat and try to send you a direct response in these few minutes. All right, our third strategy here or exercise is symbol grounding, identity before emotion. And so the purpose here is really to stabilize identity through shared sacred symbols. And again, we know those that we serve, right? We're part of that community or environment as well. And so one of the setups could be to place one central symbol. Right? It could be scripture, a cross, menorah, an image of, or a covenant text. You may even invite participants, right, to help design this space. And it could be, kind of a fun activity or kind of a room transformation, so to speak, for a ministry as well. So there's some equity building exercises kind of integrated. So we could be creative, and this isn't just like a lone project, right? So, but we do want to be intentional and keep this design minimal, right? Sometimes there's just way too much activation going on, and those that we serve, of course, that might be what we're going for, but we just don't want clutter to be um, designed to be confused with clutter, right? You could even definitely use some method to design that space before you actually get into the physical space, right? So if you have a software drawing pad, doesn't have to be too complex, but right. So in practice, number one, you may read a short identity statement, so a verbal cue here, right? And I know many like recovery groups and things of that nature have these identity statements that are read aloud in a communal space. Number two, a sense of that we belong before we perform, right? And so that could be a declaration of some sort. You could activate this in many ways, right? Everyone who enters the space, for example, um, could enter with by stating their name, by stating why they're here. It could be a round robin, um, the victories of the week, or the areas we're progressing each week as well, right? So we set the tone. Number three, ask participants to silently look at a symbol for 30 seconds. These are very intentional, right? And they're not for every communal group, right? Some areas this wouldn't be, um, I don't want to say appropriate, but let's use discernment, right? It could be watching 2 minutes of right footage as well, or something of that nature, right? The trauma insight here is straightforward, right? The symbols externalize meaning. So when identity feels fragile, these visual anchors reduce internal effort. And we may recognize as well as we're going through this process, some some visuals may not work the way we intend them to, right? They might excite when we don't want to excite. They might bring levels down, right? When we actually want excitement. So if you want to get really creative, and have interchangeable, right, symbols as well, and maybe you have some of them rotating. Although I would caution that those people that are going to be in these environments, they anticipate seeing sameness sometimes, right? Or a stable environment. So we don't want to transform the space on a weekly basis, but there might be, the book of the week, for example, would be appropriate, right? And those, um, so the facilitator could invite a participant to pick a book to highlight each week, and in doing so, we're building some equity and trust, um, and just something different, right? So we want to avoid asking as well questions such as "How do you feel?" And keep the focus on the shared grounding experience. So avoid like, "How does that cross make you feel?" And these very verbal driven questions. We could note, of course, body language and things of that nature, right? If someone enters the space and they're kind of like startled, and maybe that's what we're looking for. So notice the body response, those physiological cues, right? That could lead us to making different decisions, right? But don't be afraid to be bold, right? We could always change things. Number four is sound and silence. The sound and silence rhythm, regulating through structure. The purpose here is to use, again, predictable is the theme, right? Predictable sound patterns to create safety. So the setup is relatively simple, right? We may already have participants walking into a ministry space, for example, and there's soft music, right? Or worship music. And you're setting a tone in that sense of anticipation, um, during that interval of waiting, right? It could be as simple as a chime. If you have an outdoor space as well, um, right? You don't want it to be just annoying, right? Like constant and without stop. Um, and also consistent level, auditory level, right? We don't want things too loud, and to drown out other areas, right? If there are areas of transition, sound machines may be appropriate. So again, we could invite others into these decisions. So, for example, if it's a space that you just want calm, you could invite, right, those that you serve or other colleagues as well to help you make that decision. Here's some practice, right? Begin with 30 seconds of gentle sound and followed with 20 seconds of silence, or maybe a 30 and 30, right? It might be the only time in that person's day that they're going to have silence, right? And of course, physiologically, the posture, the body posture matters. So we want to ensure that the person feels safe and it's an appropriate body posture that we're either modeling or giving opportunity for. I tend to, gravitate towards pillows and, um, bean bags, things of that nature. Something soft nearby, accompanied with those soft sounds. The Mishkan parallel here is uh, one with about priestly service, right? Used the sound of the shofar or bells, and essentially rhythm that is organized or that organizes communal attention, and intention. And these could be simple, they don't have to be um, obvious, right? They could be kind of low key, might just be a humming in the background. You might even have the air purifier on, right? That's a rhythm sound that tends to calm some people. If they have an oscillating fan or a ceiling fan as well, things of that nature, those matter. The trauma insight is alternating both sound and silence trains the nervous system to anticipate transitions and in essence lower hypervigilance, right? All right, and we could be transparent depending on the environment of the why. So you may be in an area where you're doing some psychoeducation and you want the participant or client, um, to understand the why behind what you're doing, and that's fine too. They may want to replicate that in their home space, right? All right, our last activation here or activity would be proximity mapping. And I think this one flies under the radar so much sometimes. So, safe spatial awareness. And the purpose here is to reduce relational stress by clarifying physical space. How do we do that? So, here's one example, right? Pretty straightforward is you can arrange chairs intentionally, right? We could have, if you want to be a bit more complex here, sometimes we call this fishbowl in language development or Sadai strategies in educational environments. So the outer circle would observe, the middle circle listens, and the inner circle speaks. This one's a bit more complex. If you just want maybe two circles, right? You don't need circles, but right. The outer circle could be the listening, and there's also something called co-pilot, where maybe the person sits right next to someone, but they're instructed to only listen and not speak. Um, so that's proximity wise. They're groups of two sitting next to each other. You could also position triads. You could have simple setups that are, um, you know, islands, I call them, those individuals that may want more space or don't want proximity to anybody really. they're either want to be in the corner or the backspace, and that's fine, right? The key here is that participants really choose where to sit, and no commentary or no explanation is really required. Of course, someone may ask, where can I sit? Right? And that's fine. And your response could be you would sit where you would like to sit. Um, you may be, again, intentional about the metacognitive aspect and say, lead a group or uh, individuals to notice how the distance really affects their emotional state, their physiological state. You know, are we comfortable being distant? Do we feel safe being distant? Do we need to be closer? And here's the Torah insight: holiness included boundaries, right, and specific zones, um, right, within the structure of the tabernacle. And proximity also communicated safety, right, before words were ever spoken. And how many times, right, do we enter a space and we just automatically, there's a automaticity um, to the safety that we feel. And other times it may be the opposite, right, or somewhere more of an anxious thought. Like, I don't know what to anticipate here. Those who design amusement parks, there's specific rides I'm thinking about, um, that kind of play uh, on not being able to anticipate, and they'll play with the lighting, and physical spaces change real drastically and without any warning, right? And we see that, of course, in films and things of that nature as well, right? Jump scares and stuff like that. The trauma insight is that choice of distance restores agency and reduces pressure to perform emotionally, right? And ultimately, if we're in a leadership position or ministry position, therapeutic community, what we are hopefully, right, gearing towards is restoration of agency, right? Restoration of trust, of I know how to make a choice and I feel safe in this choice and safe in this environment. And so we hope that this guides and really part of our mission here is really the modern insights that are effective are grounded in the Bible, right? Are grounded in Yeshua, and in the Torah. Lastly, our trauma-aware facilitator language. So, many of this is just good practice, right? To use grounded, regulating phrases, right, and differentiate, of course. Um, our tone should accompany what we're saying as well, right, and fit the scope and environment. There's no pressure to share today, right? You're welcome to simply observe today. Let the room hold you today. I like to re-emphasize present. So dependent on your own personal choice, and then of course you can make those decisions on the specific verbiage. We want to avoid really reinforcing any shame-based associations, right? Like, why are you quiet? That's something to avoid. Tell us what you're feeling. I mean, especially if we're in a group setting, it's like spotlights on you. So it feels very unsafe many times, right? our reflection for this specific workshop, beauty is not aesthetic preference. It is regulation architecture. And so let's be intentional about designing a space. Not only that, those who we serve, um, the intentionality is that we fit as well, right? As facilitators, and sometimes we become participants as well, right? Depending on the environment, right? Especially if you're co-leading and co-teaching and um, part of a pastoral team or therapeutic environments where roles shift. When leaders design space intentionally, keep these in mind that safety precedes vulnerability, right? The environment needs to be a safe environment. Let's not push anyone. We know some of the consequences there, and we have a responsibility, right, to God and to those we serve. Secondly, clarity precedes correction. And lastly, belonging precedes performance. If you do have any questions or comments, I see there's a couple in the chat, and most of these will take offline. It looks like they're specific to and we want to protect those environments, right? But if you have any questions or comments as well, if you're viewing this video or listening to this video, I don't know if I have the camera on even, um, feel free to message us. It could be through Disciples in Recovery, that's fine as well. But otherwise, through Facebook, Disciples Counseling and Coaching, follow us there. And if you have an opportunity or just feel the desire, I should say, to contribute to what we do here at Disciples Counseling and Coaching, we offer coaching opportunities for communities that typically don't have access. So, as well as trainings and workshops for local churches, ministries, also the public sector as well. So, feel free to contribute. If you have any questions regarding, where the money is spent and things of that nature, we're pretty transparent about what we do and how we do it. So, again, thank you for joining us this afternoon, and have a blessed day.